Well, I'm Kent Walmsley, the Grasslands and Sustainable Ag Strategy Manager for the Nature Conservancy, and we're standing here on Dunn Ranch today, and one of the pieces of property that we're standing on is something that we just kind of revolved around and I guess what evolved here this last spring. It's called the Grass Bank. And in partnership with the Missouri Department of Conservation, we fenced in 400 acres of Dunn Ranch, and we are utilizing grazing of cattle out here on the native prairie to give us that patchiness of structure and that heterogeneity that we're looking for here on this site. You know, we don't want everything to be, 4, 5, and 6 feet tall and it just be kind of like a blanket out here. We want to make sure that there's some open pockets. The prairie chickens is one of those species for us that loves the open pockets, but there's a lot of other wildlife that needs that as well. They need that in adulthood. Some of them need it for brood rearing and things. So that's what we're trying to do here on this site. I'm standing here today with John Lucan. John, he is one of our ranchers, and it's great, as the Nature Conservancy started talking about this sustainable grazing and some of those type of things, some rotational grazing. It's great to talk about that message, but it's one thing to live it out and live it out on your own land. And that's one of the things that I appreciate what the Conservancy is doing right now. And we're standing on one of those pieces of property today with John. He actually grazes 150 acres of this grass bank, and we have another neighboring rancher that grazes on 250 acres. They bring the cattle on here for 2 different turns. They do one in the spring for 2 months, so April 15th to June 15th. And then those cows leave the site. They come back on August 15th, and we're standing here the 29th of September. They'll be coming off here in a couple weeks on October 15th. So those are a couple different turns they have, about 100 head of cattle that's out here. But I want John today to talk a little bit about his operation and kind of the partnership that we have. So John, with what size of operation are you guys?
We run about 300 mother cows, spring and fall, so we'll raise about 300 calves each year. And then we run on about 900 acres altogether between what we graze and what we hay.
Excellent. Well, I know one of the first sets of cows, mama cows you have out here on site was something neat about them. You said that you guys do a little bit of work with some embryos and things.
We put embryos in from other cows on a custom basis. They call it flushing cows, and then you take them embryos out of a high performance cow, and we put them in our cows to raise them for breeding stock. And we're doing this for a custom basis for other ranchers. We got customers in Kansas, Missouri, and Montana, so we send calves from Missouri back. They send embryos from Montana to Missouri, and we send calves back to Montana.
That's excellent. Well, I know the whole idea of this sustainable grazing. We were just down at Little Creek Farm and talking about that sustainable grazing demonstration site that we have with USDA through the Conservation Innovation Grant. And you were one of the first guys that I reached out to say, how could we align these paddocks on site? How can we align that water on site? And as we begin to talk about the potential of having you as one of the grazers here on site, you had came to me first off, and we have a couple small ponds here on site for water sources, and you had came to me and you said, hey Kent, what about this? What was that what about that you came to me and asked me if you could do here on this site?
On this, what we wanted to do is come in and divide the 150 acres, and the easiest was into 4 pastures, and then we wanted to fence the cows out of the water, not let them in any ponds, and then pump water out to a water tank for the cows. And the reason we wanted to do that is everything of our own, we set up to rotational graze, and on that 900 acres, we probably got at least 150 paddocks, and I think we got about 50 or 60 water tanks, permanent water tanks in. And our cows get new grass every day. We're constantly moving them, getting new grass, and once some cows come off, we're getting anywhere from 30 to 60 to 90 days of rest in that paddock before cows go back in, letting that grass grow. And we've been doing it. We moved to Missouri 17 years ago from Indiana, and we did some out there, and we got here, we knew we wanted to do it, and we started working on it, and it just has steadily increased. And the amount of forage we produce has just tremendously grown, and we're producing more forage, we're running more cattle, but we're also having more cover out there for the wildlife too. So it's a winning situation for what we see all the way around, and improves quality for livestock, for wildlife, and for water.
Yep. And I know as part of this partnership and us doing it, you're not handing me cash over and saying, hey, Kent,
No.
we're going to be leasing this ground out to graze it for a certain time frame. We're coming at it a little bit different here on site. And I think that's a thing that we can begin to build out, you know, as we look at Little Creek being our sustainable grazing operation, as we look to the grass bank, kind of a living and breathing piece that's connected to that. You know, obviously we're doing some rotational things here. We already got the developed, the prairie that we're trying to do, but on your land, for you grazing here, what you've agreed to is to do some conservation measures on your land. You know, one of the greatest things out here in our landscape is conversion of this native grassland and prairies.
Yeah.
You know, we want these areas to be maintained as pasture land, as prairie land. And we have, you know, a lot of the woody species. You can see a lot of trees behind us. I know you guys have many of those are coming up out of the low-lying areas into the upland areas. You're doing some woody removal of those species to keep the prairie open.
Keep it open, and keep cows from standing under them, leaving a mess. And you know, it helps a lot when we get rid of them trees with water quality, and opens up the vista a lot for all the prairie birds.
Exactly. And the rotation, you know, you guys are doing some times of rest.
Yep.
You know, when your cows are here on this site, you're resting,
Yeah.
you know, some different pasture areas. So kind of stockpiling some vegetation, you know, for down the road. And I know one of the things that we have in our agreement is on some of those areas, a vegetation height, you know, on trying to maintain that height in there and, you know, doing some interseeding or just allowing some of those, you know, areas to rest. You have a wonderful seed bank that's underneath a lot of this cool seeds and grass dominated pasture that really comes in if you graze at the right time, or you know, you kind of do some different management techniques on that site. What have you guys found on your own land, or some of the decisions that you guys have made to stimulate some of the diversity of forage as well as a great growth that's beneficial to the cows?
Just, you know, we're not on a set grazing cycle or anything, and we'll hit a different, we call them paddocks, where everything's divided up, and we'll hit them at that paddock at different times in different years. In the last 2 years, we've had some wet springs and stuff, and we kind of been hard on things and trumped them up. And then this year, I noticed we had a lot of decent moisture through June and July, and from the hoof action and things last year, and then the right moisture this year. And it was probably up already last year, but there's been quite a bit of warm season grass show up in pastures. And then you just, wide diversity, you graze this paddock here, and then you might graze one over there a week later, different times, different forages. And you know, there's some stuff that they'll eat this week, and then we'll just graze it right down. Next week, they won't hardly look at it. So it diversifies that. So you got a lot of diversification, but yet you still got good grazing.
And I think that's key. I mean, utilizing grazing as a management tool.
Yeah.
You can utilize grazing, and you can have cows grazing on a patch, and if you do not do it properly, it can be a detriment.
Yeah.
If you manage it properly, it's a tool in the toolbox. No different than here on Dunn Ranch, on what we go into areas and we spray some areas. We go in and we utilize fire as a management tool in some of those spots. You know, we're doing some rotations every 3 or 4 years with our fire, but we're also doing seasonal rotations, no different than what you were talking about on rotating your cattle various seasons in that. You know, we're using fire in that same tool, and that's why we're incorporating here on this site cows, to see if we can utilize cows in the grazing aspect to do that. And I think by doing that on our own land here for the Nature Conservancy, you know, it's great working with neighboring ranchers. You know, Dunn Ranch is a 4,000 acre footprint. And it's great, but if you look at it here in the Grand River Grassland, it's a 100,000 acre watershed. What's 4,000 acres in 100,000 acres? It's a drop in the bucket. That's right. And I think for us and our partners to begin to leverage conservation work and achieving what we desire in the landscape around that's beneficial for water quality, soil health, and wildlife, it's working hand in hand and beginning to, you know, increase the footprint that we're talking about, you know.
In the area that is being it's applied to.
Exactly.
And we've noticed too, what you do this year, you can do the exact same thing next year, and you get totally opposite.
You gotta get different results.
It's a lot more art than science, and a lot of it's just the way Mother Nature works. You can, if you think you got it figured out, she'll prove you wrong the next time. doesn't work.
Yeah, and I know you you gave me a call and you said, "Hey Ken, I think we're going to pull cows off here for a week or two, and we're going to transition another set in on some of that." I appreciate your foresight of looking at the site and knowing at the time what it needed.
Yeah.
We've been pretty blessed this spring and summer with the moisture levels we've gotten, and we know back and forth in the discussion that we've had that there could be management decisions that need to change as we move forward. You got 100 head of cattle that you can bring here on this site, and for 2-month periods of time. We know that, hey, if we have a drier time, we might have to adjust that a little bit. And I appreciate the flexibility that we have and the communication back and forth that's doing the best that we can and being good stewards of this land and the native prairie that's here.
Get the most performance out of cattle, but yet you want to leave manage it as best you can for wildlife and everything else all at the same time. So it's definitely a balanced approach.
So with us standing here in the Grand River grassland, you yourself being one of the ranchers that's in this area, you and your family, I know it's kind of a family thing for you. Your dad got started in it, yourself. I know you've had a young boy out here a few times. You got your young daughter that are interested in this type of thing. If there was one takeaway that you could tell folks that may be looking at this from the ranching community or just folks in general, what are some of the things that they need to be looking at to be able to raise the bar in terms of, doing the blend of ranching with the conservation world, but also ensuring that there is some economic stability for the ranchers to be able to continue that lifestyle and keep the land as it is. I don't want them coming in here to the pasture land and, doing row crop agriculture in it or doing a bunch of tree planting in this area. That's not really what we do. What are a couple of things that you would point to?
Well, the thing that helps us a lot is a rotational grazing system, and allows us, to run more cows on less acres, but yet do definitely a better overall job than we would if we just turned a certain number of cows out and let them on that same area year round. That we wouldn't do as much, and you wouldn't get, it just wouldn't be economical. The reason we were able to do it is we were able to run enough cows on the acres we got, because the land has gotten so expensive. And part of the reason is that the row crop, which hasn't done a lot for the quality of the land, has probably been a detriment to the area, the acres that are being row crop from a wildlife standpoint and an erosion standpoint. So, that's a big benefit. And, my dad's always had the philosophy, and I have too, you'd like to leave it better than when you got it. So that's one thing we strive for. We want to leave the land in better shape than when we leave than when we came. And that doesn't happen overnight, but you just constantly work at it, and over time it gets better. And we can see it in soil health and water quality and everything. And you see it, you can definitely tell a difference from things that have been well taken care of. And we like to have our place looking nice, and and everything like that. And it all comes from, people think you got to spend a lot of money. Well, sometimes it's not spending a lot of money. Sometimes it's just doing the labor to make things happen.
Well, I know, John, I sure appreciate the partnership that we have together on this side. I know we're in this for at least 3 years together as we do that, and I'm just looking forward to see on how this site transforms and the benefits that we see here, but also the benefits that I hope that you're able to realize on your own land as part of this effort. Because it's a give and take in the springtime when you bring your cows here. Yes, they love to eat the fescue that's popping up in here, and a lot of those cool season grasses that get kicked off in the spring. Those are a lot of the species that I don't want here, so I want your cows eating all that you can. And then later in the season, when those kind of cooler season grasses and fescues are a little bit more toxic maybe and not very, very palatable for your cows, it's where the native prairie here that's behind us in the summer months is a fantastic forage for your cows.
I sure hope we see the prairie really take off from the grazing. We'll see the warm season grasses, infiltrate more, get better stands and things like that. And and the forbs and everything with it. And we talked this spring one time, cows are in here, and there was something you wouldn't think they'd eat, but it was at the right time, and they just grubbed it down to they didn't grub it off, but they sure liked it. And it's something 2 weeks later they wouldn't liked, but it allows us to stockpile feed, and which allows for more wildlife and also saves us on feed costs too.
Exactly.
So it's an economical benefit to us having more acres resting acres at home, but having acres to move cows onto.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to paint the picture of down there at Little Creek on the sustainable grazing operation, how we're going to do the paddock divisions and things like that through the USDA's Conservation Innovation Grant. It really drives down to, you know, some economics. I mean, if it's not profitable and viable, folks aren't going to do it.
Yeah, it's hard, you know, today for most operators, if you can't make money doing it, it's hard to come up with the money to do it.
Yeah.
You know, or you always got to weigh the economical advantages to it, whether it's justifiable, and that's just part of it. It's hard to get away from it. If you can't make a living off of it and can't break even, you're not going to be doing it very long.
That's right. Well, I definitely appreciate all the insight you've given us. Is, you know, I'm no expert in this, and the Nature Conservancy is no expert in this grazing world. It's working alongside folks like you that live it and breathe it every day, that's helping to educate us so we can begin to utilize our land and begin to make a change, you know, for agriculture in a sustainable manner to move forward. I mean, we want it economically viable for you, but we also want it very effective for the wildlife and the soil health and water quality that we're concerned about as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a balanced approach, and I'm no expert on it either. Every day you learn something new. The minute you think you're an expert, it'll prove you wrong.
That's right.
So, but no, we're glad to work with you guys and appreciate it and everything. And I got a lot of hope for all of it. You know, it's going to be interesting to see how it develops over the next 2 or 3 years. It's been quite a few years since there's been cows on here, I would imagine.
It has. So we'll see what Mother Nature gives us, and we'll do out to it the best we can.
Sounds great.
Thank you.